Welcome back to Zane Customs. In this week's episode, I'm going to be upgrading this old custom D&D figure. So during this campaign, I wanted to do some art of the characters to help the players visualize better. So I initially did this drawing, which is terrible and I hated it. And then a while later, I did this one, which is also terrible. I didn't spend a lot of time on them. I was just trying to bust them out and also trying to find the character at the same time, so they're just bad. And the third drawing I did was this one, and luckily I recorded it because it ended up being pretty good in my opinion. And for the pose for this guy, this is actually a pretty cool character that my buddy came up with, where basically he found this sword in the woods and was told by like the gods of the world to wait here for the chosen one. Basically, whoever can pull the sword out of the stone is going to be the chosen one. So he stayed there all his life, and anybody that came, he fought, and he basically figured, if they could beat me in a fight, then they're the chosen one and they can have the sword, because the chosen one obviously has to take the sword because they're chosen. So for like 50 years or so, he just stayed in the forest and guarded this sword. And every once in a while, some rando would come across him and he would fight him, and he never lost. So now he's an old man and basically is like having an existential crisis, and he's wondering, like, did I kill the chosen one? Am I the chosen one? Doesn't really know what's going on. So at the start of the campaign, all that has already happened, and now he's just like a drunkard in the town tavern, and basically that's where the character starts. So I thought it was a really cool idea for a character, and kind of gave me this idea for this drawing, for this pose. And also, this is supposed to be like the magical sword that the god sent him to protect, and he's also a cleric at the same time. So that's why later on you'll see he's got some magic going on. His hands start glowing and stuff. But anyway, yeah, like I was saying, he's a really cool idea for a character. But he's also, like, he's insane. He's kind of senile. He's spent his whole life killing people, and now he's wondering, was it even worth it? Was that something that he actually needed to do, or did he just murder a bunch of innocent people? So he's kind of going crazy, and so the idea of him having long hair and all that stuff kind of fits that. And also design-wise, you probably could have told from the previous two drawings I showed that he's got a red tunic with armor, and that's something I wanted to carry over into this drawing, of course, because that was something that came from the player himself that he wanted. And basically, this red tunic comes from the gods. They gave it to him for all his service, and it's like it can never be cut, it can never be torn. It's like super pristine. So I wanted to. And you'll see when I get to the new sculpt, I try to make it look as nice as possible, but make his armor and his underclothing just torn and patchy, and have lots of different parts where he had to like re-sew parts together, things like that. But this tunic, no matter what happens to it, it's always pristine. But we'll see that in a minute. To speak more about the actual drawing, what I did with this one was probably 2 or 3 years ago. It's quite an old drawing. I initially did all the drawings for the D&D characters that, if you've been watching all these videos, you would have seen. And then this was the last drawing I did. So I think it's a lot better than most of those old ones, obviously because I did it later. Now here I am. This is ZBrush. Unfortunately, I don't have a video of me sculpting his initial form in Forger. I did have it, and it somehow got corrupted, so I can't get it to play anymore. But I also did the sculpt years ago, like all the other D&D figures I did on my iPad in an app called Forger. And Forger's a great app, and I love the app. I love it just purely for the fact that it helped me kind of get into sculpting and taught me a lot. But I eventually got to the point where I wanted to do more than Forger would allow me, and that's when I eventually moved over to ZBrush, which is the program I'm using here. And ZBrush is just a lot more powerful, and it's what all the professionals use when they sculpt literally anything for like movies, video games, TV shows, all those things. They use ZBrush. But basically what I'm trying to do here is same pose, same everything, just fix anything that seems disproportionate to me, and then go in and add a lot of different details, like add actual fabric texture and things like that all over his body. And I do add in some new armor pieces and things like that, but mostly I'm just basically keeping everything pretty similar, just making it look better, more realistic. You'll see throughout the video that I struggled at certain points. Early on I was kind of struggling with the boots, and then I just buckled down and I ended up getting them working pretty well. But the arms, from the shoulder down, that was probably the hardest part for me, just getting those to work. And here what I'm actually doing is I pulled a sword in that I had previously modeled for one of my realistic Minecraft variants, and just pulled it in here, and I cut off the hilt and the handle and all that, and I'm doing a brand new hilt and handle. But the blade itself was exactly what I was looking for this particular design, so I was just able to pull that in, and it helped me get it done a lot quicker. And I'm actually pretty happy with the way the sword turned out. You can see me, I'll kind of cut back and forth between the drawing and ZBrush, because I want it to look exactly like the drawing, because I was pretty happy with the design for the sword. But overall it looks so much better than my initial Forger model, because in Forger I just took a cylinder and used that for the handle, which I did here, but then I added some grip and a leather texture to it. And then for the actual blade, I literally just had a cube and flattened it and then stretched it out, so it didn't even have an edge or anything like that. It was pretty terrible, but it ended up looking a lot better on this one. And now here you can see what I was talking about earlier, where I put a lot of work into the boots, and they're actually probably my favorite part of this whole sculpt. I just think the boots turned out really good. But that, along with pretty much every part of this sculpt except for the sword and the red tunic, which you'll see later on, I wanted to make it look really worn out, and like he's had to like sew patches on his knees, or add some new wraps around clothing that has torn, or re-sew parts of the seams that have ripped, and just things like that. Because basically, like I said, this guy went out into the woods and found the sword, and the gods told him, like, protect the sword, wait for the chosen one. So he never left. So he's been out in the woods for like 50 years or so. So he has the same clothes that he's had since day one, and he's just had to, if he got any new clothing or anything, it'd be from the people that he's killed trying to defend the sword. Same with armor pieces. So there might be some mismatched stuff, like the patches on his knees. I wanted those to be different colors to show like he's got there are different fabrics coming from different things, but like basically just wanted to really make all his attire look super run down. One thing I was super happy with about the sculpt too was the way the pants turned out. I've been learning how to do some new techniques in ZBrush to get a lot better textures and consistent textures over your whole mesh. And when I did textures in the past, they're more of like stamps. If you just use them traditionally, you just kind of stamp the texture on all over your model, which is fine, and it works with like really organic looking models. But like with something like pants, where if you have a fabric texture, it's not going to be randomized. It's almost like a grid, so you need it to be perfect. That's where using the surface and UV maps and all those things come in. And it was kind of a struggle at first, but I watched a lot of YouTube videos and learned how to use it, and I definitely think it was worth it. A lot of my textures have been getting a lot better. But then, like you can see here on these boots, I'm giving it kind of a leather texture. I want it to look like it's made out of leather, and with that, it's randomized. I just use that stamp brush and just kind of stamped a leather texture all over randomly. And if some of those textures overlapped, it doesn't really matter, because leather obviously comes from an animal and it's organic, so you're not really going to notice anything like that. And in fact, it might even make it look better. But it's just for certain things like fabric, or I don't know, mainly fabric, and I'm sure there's other things that you would use it for too. Using surface noise really helps for stuff like that. And I think this is like my favorite part of a sculpture, when I'm getting most everything done. It's looking pretty good, and then I can just go in and add some final details, like those straps on top of the boot. Those weren't there in my initial design, but just adding little things like that, even though I don't even know how realistic it would be like in medieval times if they had stuff like that, but I like adding just random details like that. It's fun. And I kind of took a while here trying to find the right material for the tunic, because I wanted it to look not like silk, but a little more reflective, like it would be a really expensive fabric or something. And trying to find the right texture for that kind of took me a while. But here I am moving on to the hands, and I've said this in many videos that hands are the worst. I feel like I've been getting better at them slowly, and I definitely like when I have to do a hand, because it forces me to get better. Well, I like doing it afterwards, like after it's done and it's looking okay, then I'm happy I did it. But in the moment, I hate doing it, and it's just so time consuming, and you get anything wrong, it just looks terrible, and it's just a struggle. Like I said, this whole sculpture, I'm mostly happy with it, but like from the shoulders down, even though I'm happy with it, it wasn't exactly how I wanted them to look, and I had a lot of struggles trying to make them look really good. Like in particular, his left arm, which is the only arm you can see at the moment, I feel like is a little too long. Like the distance from his shoulder to his elbow, and then from his elbow to his wrist, I just feel like it's too long when you compare it to his right arm, which maybe it's not. I mean, it could be fine, but just little things like that kind of bug me. But it's things like that are kind of the downside of sculpting the way I do, because I record everything and I try to make a video out of everything I sculpt, and I want to put out a video a week. So like generally with most of my sculpts, I have 1 week to do them. So like if I had all the time in the world, I would have worked on this one for a week, and then worked on another one for a week, and then maybe came back, and then that time away would really help you see problems, and like I'd really be like, oh yeah, that arm is bad, or actually it's not that bad, I was just caught up in it in the moment. But seeing as how I have to, or I set myself that goal to get out one video a week, that's kind of all the time I have. And there are some sculptures that I'll work on in my downtime, and they take a lot longer than a week, but on average most of them I try to get out in a week. And then a lot of times I like this one, actually I finished him, I rendered out all the photos for my Etsy page and all those things, and made this video, and then later on I actually went up and did some more detail work on it and things like that. Or if someone ends up buying one of my sculpts on Etsy, I'll usually go in and look at it and make sure I was actually happy with it, and if I wasn't, I'll fix up some things before I actually print it off and paint it up and send it out. Just because, again, I don't have all as much time as I would like to work on these sculptures, so sometimes even though they might be 90% there, they're not 100%, and I just want to finish them off and do some little things. And a perfect example of running out of time is his face. I'm reasonably satisfied with it, like it looks fine, but it might actually be the weakest part of the sculpture. Now that I think about it, I hated the arms just because they were a struggle to do it, but the face, nothing really changed from the Forger model to the ZBrush model, except for a little bit more texture in the hair. And that was because faces are also hard, so I was just kind of putting it off. And well, faces and hands are both hard, but the hands really had to sell it in this sculpt because he's got his hands wrapped around the sword, and if that didn't look good, the whole sculpture was going to look bad. So I knew those were more crucial than the head and the hair and all that. So I did a little bit of work on it, but I mainly was just pushing it off till last and didn't end up having enough time to really go in and do the amount of work I really wanted to do on it. Which again, it isn't a big deal. I can always go back later, and especially if someone buys it off Etsy, I'll go in and fix it up and get it to where I really want it to do. But it's unfortunate that for a lot of these videos, the sculptures aren't always 100% how I want them. And that's more so true with the newer sculpts I've been doing, especially these D&D ones, because I've been really trying to push myself and do a lot more details and things like that. A lot of my old Minecraft sculptures, not all of them, but most of them, I'm pretty much happy with the way they turned out. But the more detail and stuff I try to get into a sculpt, then the harder it is to actually finish it, because obviously the more detail, the more time it's going to take. But that is one of the benefits of learning new techniques, like I mentioned earlier, the surface map, or excuse me, UV maps and surface texturing for like fabric and stuff. That's something that would have took me a lot longer to do, going in and adding in, kind of using that stamp brush to texture all the fabric. And now I can just use surface texturing, and it just automatically does it, and does it better than I ever could have. So the more I learn about ZBrush, the quicker I can kind of move through it. And here's another thing that I, along with that forearm armor that you just saw me working on, they weren't in the initial sculpture, or not even necessarily in the initial drawing, but they're something I wanted to add. These pocket pouches are definitely something that, like, story-wise would make sense for him to have, because he's got to have something to hold supplies in, and if he's getting into battles all the time, I'm assuming he's got to have some sort of medical supplies and things like that. And here I also added a sleeping roll, because he's a man of the wild, and he's lived out in the wild for years, but he wasn't initially from the wild. You know, he was born in a civilization, so even though I would assume this character could rough it pretty good if he had to, if he has the option of a sleeping roll, I'm going to also assume that he's going to take it. That pretty much wraps it up all right there. Here's some final rendered out photos, and I am actually pretty happy with it. It looks pretty good. There's a few things I would go in and adjust. Like I said, his left arm looks a little long there, his bicep, and his face is under rendered, but for the most part I'm really happy with it. Love the way his pants, his boots, I absolutely love the way they turned out. I'm pretty happy with the majority of this entire sculpture. If you like this sculpture, you can check it out on my Etsy account. Anything I sculpt up here, you can purchase off my Etsy account. And I super appreciate anybody that's willing to like, comment, subscribe, or even anybody that's willing to watch my videos all the way through. Super appreciate it. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next week.